There's something almost invisible yet profoundly transformative that happens when a man truly falls in love. It isn't just the sparkle in his eyes or the sweet words he speaks. It's an internal, silent, and powerful shift that begins to guide his actions instinctively and authentically. When love is real, he doesn't need to force behaviors or repeat romantic cliches. He starts moving by an unconscious impulse that reveals hidden parts of his soul. This movement isn't random. It's as if something ancestral awakens within him, calling him on a deeper journey, where he finds not only the other person, but also himself. What he begins to do reveals more about his psyche than he himself may realize. If you believe that true love transforms from the inside out, write in the comments, "Love awakens the best in us." From the perspective of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, true love is a powerful catalyst for the process of individuation, the path by which an individual becomes more fully conscious of themselves, integrating their inner polarities. When a man genuinely falls in love, he is confronted with aspects of his psyche that were once dormant or repressed. This shows up concretely in his attitudes and choices, which become driven by something deeper than superficial desire or the need for approval. Jung teaches us that the unconscious projects onto the other what we have not yet recognized in ourselves. That's why, when a man loves truly, he doesn't merely idealize his beloved. He begins to see in her the reflection of his own anima, the feminine aspect of his psyche. This projection moves him toward balance, awakening in him behaviors that are more empathetic, protective, vulnerable, and spiritually connected. At the same time, the shadow comes into play. True love demands that he face his insecurities, fears, and emotional wounds. To be present authentically, he must integrate parts of himself he once avoided or denied. The result is a more whole man who begins to act with greater sensitivity, responsibility, and intuition. These changes aren't social performances. They're reflections of the inner transformation love brings. He starts doing that thing he once thought beyond his reach, truly listening, protecting without controlling, sustaining the emotional bond even in uncertainty. In other words, he learns to love not just with his heart, but with his soul. When a man is truly in love, the first significant change occurs within his emotional landscape. Something begins to crack, not violently, but like a subtle fissure in the walls he's built over his lifetime. These defenses, erected to shield him from pain, vulnerability, or failure, begin to dissolve, not from weakness, but because true love creates a space where he finally feels safe to be seen. Analytical psychology views these defenses as ego constructions, mechanisms designed to maintain a solid, coherent image, often based on distorted masculine archetypes. Yet when real love arrives, those images soften. The man in love no longer needs to prove his strength or hide his emotions. Instead, he feels an almost unconscious urge to allow himself to feel more deeply. This shift toward emotional openness isn't a romantic gesture. It's a vital stage in Jung's individuation process. By letting his emotions surface, he embarks on a journey of self-discovery that can be both liberating and challenging. At first, he may resist, perhaps feeling awkward sharing his feelings or fearing vulnerability. But gradually, the emotional bond builds a bridge between conscious and unconscious, allowing him to reconnect with parts of himself that were forgotten or denied. Notably, this opening doesn't happen theoretically or rationally. It just emerges. He starts saying, "I feel," more than "I think." He notices details once irrelevant: his partner's mood, the nuances of a shared silence, the need to listen without correcting. He no longer reacts solely with logic, but with genuine presence. That doesn't make him fragile or passive. On the contrary, true emotional openness requires courage. It takes inner strength to admit fear, acknowledge longing, and accept insecurity. The man truly in love discovers a new form of strength, not through control or superiority, but through surrender and attentive listening. He doesn't need to win, he just needs to be fully present. To an outside observer, these changes may seem subtle, but in his inner world, they're immense. Internally, he's passing through the portals of the shadow, confronting old rejections, societal expectations, and the traumas that shaped his approach to love. True love invites him to trust, not only his partner, but himself, and that is a spiritual leap. As his defenses fall away, the possibility of mistakes, stumbles, and discomfort arises. He doesn't become a perfect man, but a more authentic one. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, he learns to communicate. Instead of fleeing in crisis, he seeks shared solutions. These new attitudes don't come from a how-to guide, but from a genuine desire to connect more humanly. This emotional transformation extends beyond the relationship. He begins to relate differently to friends, work, and family. There's an emotional refinement, a heightened sensitivity, and even if he doesn't voice every feeling, his actions declare, "I am here, whole." True love is the force that dismantles walls and plants roots. It marks the beginning of a path where feeling is no longer a threat, but a bridge to a fuller life. When a man truly loves, he doesn't only give himself to another, he rediscovers himself in every gesture of emotional openness. In Jungian psychology, the anima is the feminine aspect of the male psyche, an archetype carrying energies of feeling, intuition, receptivity, and creativity. When a man falls deeply in love, this archetype is powerfully activated, often unconsciously. What looks like an emotional connection is really the start of a profound psychological process, integrating the anima. This doesn't make him more feminine in a social sense, but connects him to an inner world that was dormant or repressed. His beloved acts as a living mirror, reflecting not just desire or affection, but something deeper, the part of him able to feel delicately, imagine profoundly, and surrender without losing identity. Many men are taught to deny this dimension. Culture prizes linear reasoning, strength, and productivity, traits tied to the masculine principle, but the human soul is polar and needs balance. True love provokes that balance. The woman isn't just an object of affection, but a catalyst inviting the man to journey inward. Integrating the anima means listening to intuition without distrust, noticing what goes unspoken, valuing dreams as messages from the unconscious, and allowing heart and soul to dialogue with reason without one negating the other. This integration also awakens affective sensitivity that was hidden. The man learns to appreciate small gestures, careful words, and true listening. He realizes that feeling deeply isn't weakness, but a pathway to authentic connection. True love makes him more attentive, subtle, and receptive. That path isn't free of tension. Facing the anima often means confronting old resistances, fear of ridicule, emotional exposure, judgment. Unaccustomed to this depth, he may stumble at first, but as he persists, he discovers the strength in vulnerability, not a power of dominance but of expansion. The anima is also linked to creativity and symbolic expression. That's why men in love often reconnect with art, music, nature, or pursuits that once felt distant from their rational routines. They seek beauty and meaning in simplicity. It's the soul demanding room to breathe. This sensitive awakening doesn't make him fragile but whole. He learns to value what he once dismissed. He loves with presence and poetry, not technique, guided by the soul. True love is a rite of passage. The beloved is not just a partner, but a symbolic teacher. By being loved deeply, she opens his soul and returns him to his wholeness. Integrating the anima doesn't weaken his masculine core, it strengthens it through union with his hidden self. In that inner space, he begins to do that thing he never did before. Welcome without judging, listen without defending, care without suffocating. He does it not out of duty, but because by loving truly, he sees with the eyes of his heart, and once opened, those eyes never close. When love is real, it transcends fleeting desire and becomes commitment. Often misread as imprisonment, this word gains new meaning at the soul's center. A man truly in love doesn't just want to be near his beloved, he feels an intimate need to protect the bond, build something lasting, and be a reliable presence in her life. This commitment arises from within, not from external pressure, social expectation, or cultural convention. That within is where unconscious and conscious align, signaling that something precious has been found and must be nurtured. In Jungian terms, this movement is deeply tied to individuation. By taking responsibility for the relationship, the man also claims responsibility for himself. The bond isn't only with his partner, it's with his own integrity. He distances himself from reckless attitudes, emotional games, and ambiguity, not because anyone demands it, but because he no longer recognizes himself in those postures. Loving truly demands coherence between intention and action, word and presence. He practices this coherence even in the hardest moments. True commitment also shows in silent, almost imperceptible ways. He begins to think of the future, not to control, but from a spontaneous desire for continuity. He wants to be there. He wants to build a solid foundation. He wants to grow together. And that wanting is action, choosing consciously, caring for the other's well-being, investing in the small daily routines that sustain affection. As Jung said, no real encounter between two people happens without transformation. When a man decides to protect the bond he's built, he tells the world, and himself, that he's willing to be affected, molded, and become more than he was. This requires humility, for the ego must yield so love can structure his being, and it requires courage, for genuine commitment involves risks, getting hurt, failing, losing. Yet by facing those risks, he grows stronger. Instead of fleeing difficulty, he seeks dialogue. Rather than falling silent in crisis, he seeks understanding. He begins to see the relationship as a living organism needing constant care, mutual listening, and space to breathe. In that process, he gains emotional maturity. This maturity distances him from idealized, childish, or needy love. He no longer loves to be saved, to be filled, or to prove something. He loves because he sees in the other a mirror of his own journey. What he begins to do is a series of small gestures that build trust, being present on tough days, supporting without smothering, owning mistakes, apologizing, sustaining the bond through turbulence. True commitment also means learning to say no when needed, setting healthy boundaries, respecting the other's space, and valuing individuality. It means understanding that love demands communion, not fusion, possible only when both are whole, free, and conscious. The man who truly loves acts as guardian of the bond, not by obligation, but by choice. He understands that the relationship is a fertile field, requiring cultivation with attention, responsibility, and presence. He commits not because he has all the answers, but because he's willing to seek them, grow, and walk the path together. This authentic commitment reflects the transformation true love brings. It's not empty promises, but consistent actions. It's when love becomes a decision, an attitude, a stance toward life. At that point, the man isn't just loving someone, he's becoming someone who loves with awareness. There's something that happens when a man truly loves that defies easy explanation. It's an intimate transformation, almost invisible externally but profound and irreversible. He may not notice it at first or be able to explain it clearly, but something inside him changes. His thoughts grow more attentive, his actions more coherent, his choices more thoughtful. It's as if love has touched a part of him that always existed but lay dormant. This change isn't dramatic or overnight. It seeps into daily actions, his worldview, and his relationship with time. The man in love begins to slow down inwardly. He values the present moment, genuine encounters, and shared silence. This is a sign that his inner connection is being restored. In Jungian language, it's the soul becoming more present in consciousness. True love acts as a mirror of wholeness. When a man encounters the depth of an emotional bond, he often begins, without realizing it, to reorganize his inner universe. What once felt essential now seems superficial. What was noise becomes silence. What was a search for distraction turns into a longing for presence. He changes his way of being in the world, even if he can't quite explain why. This silent transformation has roots in the unconscious. Jung asserted that the psyche's most meaningful contents express not with fanfare but through symbols, dreams, feelings, and subtle behavioral shifts. The man in love begins to feel a greater sense of purpose. He feels more connected to life, more open to mystery, and more willing to grow. Even without full understanding, he follows that impulse sincerely. His values also shift. What once drew him, status, social approval, power, control, loses its luster. He becomes more sensitive to the beauty of simplicity, the depth of real bonds, and the importance of listening and affection. He prioritizes the essential, even if it means stepping away from standards that once seemed indispensable. This shift in values clearly shows that an inner transformation is underway. Another sign of this silent change is the emergence of tenderness once suppressed. He begins to care differently, to observe, to intuit, to anticipate needs, and to offer support not out of obligation, but from the soul's impulse. He no longer needs to prove anything. He just needs to be present. And that presence transforms not only him, but everyone around him. This inner journey can be uncomfortable at times. As he transforms, he clashes with old parts of himself. He may feel nostalgic for impulsive behaviors, ego-driven routines, or empty pleasures. He may even resist trying to return to his old self. But something has changed. The connection with another has reignited his connection to himself, and once touched by that movement, there's no going back without feeling the invisible void that once was. This process also sparks deeper existential questions about life's meaning, the purpose of relationships, and the nature of love. He begins to reflect more, to question more, and to feel more. This expansion of consciousness is one of true love's greatest gifts and its greatest responsibility. For as he grows more conscious, he can no longer pretend he doesn't know, doesn't feel, or doesn't care. In the end, he becomes other, not by ceasing to be who he was, but by becoming who he always was. In essence, true love reveals more than it changes, and what he begins to do, however small or imperceptible, becomes sacred. He lives with more presence, loves with more truth, and stands more fully, and that changes everything. True love transforms a man not only on the outside, but primarily on the inside. He feels more, listens more, acts more deeply. Unknowingly, he begins a process of reuniting with himself, a silent, irreversible journey. By making room for emotion, embracing sensitivity, committing authentically, and letting his soul guide him, he accesses dimensions that lay hidden beneath the masks the world taught him to wear. There's no manual for this transformation. Each gesture, each decision, each internal shift arises from truly listening to what love awakens within him. And it's that awakening that reveals the man in his entirety, strong, sensitive, present, and true. What he starts to do isn't a technique, but a reflection of a soul touched. If this content helped you see love from a new perspective, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. And don't go away just yet. The video on your screen is the perfect continuation of this topic. Click and discover more about how true love can be the gateway to your own transformation.